Hi everyone, welcome to the June 28th edition of the TimeformUS Pacecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and we're looking back at the last week of racing around the country, highlighting some stakes action for a few venues. Thistledown, where they ran the Grade 3 Ohio Derby last Saturday, Belmont Park and Churchill Downs, where they ran a few graded stakes races last weekend, the Mother Goose at Belmont and the Chicago Stakes at Churchill. Then we'll finish things up just highlighting a couple of notable speed figures from parks that took place very early in the week that I know Craig had mentioned on Twitter, so I took a look at those races. But Craig, just kind of a slow week in racing in general, so we'll talk about some maiden allowance races that took place as well, just looking at some horses that might have some potential to improve in the future, but kind of a slow week in terms of speed figures.
Yeah, not a lot of huge ones out there. I thought there was some decent racing. That's kind of telling. We're starting the week with Thistledown. Nothing against Thistledown. They put on a nice card Saturday, but just not one that would usually top our show.
And there were some familiar names in action in that Ohio Derby at Thistledown. 1.125 was the distance for this Grade 3 event for the 3-year-olds. And the 3 horses that were coming out of the Kentucky Derby were the 3 that dominated the race, kind of unsurprisingly. Tawny Port, the horse that achieved the best result in the Derby, I believe finishing 7th in the Run for the Roses. He was able to improve here to get the victory. It feels like none of these horses are among the upper echelon of 3-year-olds, but I thought they all ran pretty well, taking a step forward from their Derby performances.
Yeah, they did. It was a nice race. The figures came back well. Tawny Port, the winner, got a 119. White Abarrio actually got a 120, and Classic Causeway back in third got a 121. So that's enough to tell you that the pace was hot. All of the fractions are coded in red from the quarter all the way through the mile, and I would say the figures kind of match what I saw. Tawny Port got the best trip of the 3. The other 2 were really close to that fast pace, but he's a good solid horse, and I'm not saying he couldn't beat them on a more average pace because he's come into good form, and it's just these are the kind of the state derbies that we're going to see. These are the kind of horses that excel in them. Horses that weren't quite good enough for the Kentucky Derby and the big 100-point preps leading up to it. I guess White Obarrio did win one of them, but they're just a level below what we saw in the Triple Crown races, but they can certainly rack up some wins and some money.
Yeah, and Tawny Port kind of did feel like the one that might still have upside coming out of the Kentucky Derby. He was the horse that it didn't really seem like he had peaked early in the winter time. He had just won that Lexington with the best performance of his career just a few weeks prior to the Kentucky Derby, so he ran okay in the Derby, and it just felt like maybe he was the one that would have a license to take a step forward over the summer, and he took a step forward in the right direction here to win this race. But like you said, he did get a good setup in doing so. I thought the Classic Causeway actually put in a pretty game performance. He was attending the pace the entire way with Pineapple Man. As you were saying, all of the TimeformUS pace figures for this race are color-coded in red, so it was a pretty fast pace. And coming to the top of the stretch, it kind of looked like Classic Causeway was going to completely throw in the towel, but he actually battled on pretty gamely to only lose this race by 2 1/4 lengths.
Yeah, it was a really good effort. He basically didn't try in the Derby. I don't remember what happened, but he didn't show any of his customary speed. Just kind of had a jog around the track that day. But yeah, he showed he's going to be a threat, and he's got some high early speed. And I wonder if he's one that would do better on a turn back. I've seen some people speculating maybe that it is the right direction for him. There's some pretty good sprinters out there, so it's not like he would just turn back and have the field at his mercy. But maybe that would be an interesting to see him at Saratoga and maybe a 7 furlong race.
I agree with that. He looked so good in his debut, winning at 7 furlongs last year at Saratoga, and you would like to see him get one more chance to go a little bit shorter, just given that ample early speed that he has and his ability to carry it. And I like that he actually was able to pass a horse and battle on in this race. I think we saw a different dimension from him because he had gotten just perfect setups, basically leading the entire way in those 2 victories from Tampa Bay down earlier this year. So he's a horse that I do want to follow, depending on what they do with him moving forward. I'd also like to see a turn back for Ethereal Road, who finished up the track here. He didn't run that well, kind of made a middle move and flattened out, contrary to what a lot of people believe about this horse. I think shorter is going to be better for him, so hopefully his connections can get him in a sprint race with a little bit of pace moving forward.
Yeah, one thing I'd say about him is at this point, the betters didn't really show it. He went off 5-1, but based on speed figures, he's just way overrated. He's a horse whose best figure, I believe, is like a 110, which puts him even far below these grade 3 types.
Let's move on to the other stakes that attracted some familiar names on Saturday at Thistledown. That was the Lady Jacqueline Stakes. This one was won by Army Wife, who was coming back second off the layoff. Craig, we had talked about this a little bit when we handicapped this race for our DRF preview last week. Mike Maker has great stats with horses coming second off the layoff, and Army Wife just took the step forward that she needed to take to beat this field. There were some other horses in this field, though, that just didn't really show up with their best efforts.
No, they didn't. I think she was the most likely winner. I mean, she was a 6-5 favorite. She did take that jump forward. She got a 114 speed figure, which I think matches what her career best had been coming in from last year as a 3-year-old. So she may even have another forward move in her. She's going to have to if she's going to move into tougher company because this was a listed stakes with a big purse, no doubt. But the horse she beat Crazy Beautiful. She's not scaring anybody in graded competition. So the two that were supposed to run ran well. The horse I picked, Microcap, just ran okay, basically matched her speed figure from her win the other two times out, but the other two just took a little bit of a step forward.
Yeah, I thought Crazy Beautiful just didn't really have much of an excuse. She had to look at it at the top of the stretch and got up on even terms with Army Wife. That one just turned her away, and it feels like both of these fillies haven't really taken a step forward from their 3-year-old seasons. Both of them appeared to peak over the summer of their 3-year-old years, and they just haven't really run faster since they've turned 4, so we'll see if they're able to do better in subsequent starts. I should note Maracuja, who was the other no-show in this race. She was pulled up towards the back of the pack. I know the Equibase chart published something that sounded very concerning, but her connections have since said that the tests they did, they've come back negative, and it doesn't seem like she has any major injury, so she'll live to fight another day, and hopefully everything's okay with her down the line. Let's move on to Belmont Park, where the graded stakes that they ran on Saturday was the Grade 2 Mother Goose for the 3-year-old fillies, and a bit of an upset here, Craig. Only 4 went to the starting gate, kind of a upsetting trend that we're seeing in stakes racing around the country. But the heavy favorite, Juju's Map, wasn't even able to finish in the exacta as she faded through the stretch as Gerrymander, second off the layoff, just seemed to really appreciate the stretch out in distance.
Yeah, she ran a really nice race in here. Juju's Map didn't really show up and match that return race that we had seen, and Gerrymander took a big step forward from her 2-year-old season. If you could excuse that 8 bells at Churchill, her comeback race where she had a bit of a tough start and put a line through it, she fit in here with those. She had ran a 100 speed figure back in November when she won the Tempted Stakes at Belmont, the same track. So she obviously likes the elongated one turn route races, and she took a big step forward here to get a 114 speed figure. So good effort from her. And I hate to say, I didn't really see any excuses for the ones in behind her. She was just much the best.
It was an interesting race to watch for the opening quarter mile because Gerrymander actually broke on the lead and had secured the front end by about a length for the opening quarter. And it just appeared that Florent Firoux, maybe a quarter mile into the race, realized that he wanted to be more forward on Juju's Map, and the filly got a little bit aggressive, so that one rushed up to take the lead. The second quarter did go much faster than the opening quarter, so maybe that wasn't the best move to make that rush up to take over in the middle of the backstretch as Juju's Map did, but Gerrymander, given what transpired, ended up getting the perfect trip just sitting in the pocket. Rosario seemed happy to adapt to that trip, and she just proved to be the best. I'm not sure that the trip is really what made her win this race. She was much the best, as you alluded to, but it definitely didn't hurt that she was able to pull that trip in behind the 2 speeds. Shahama ran okay second time in this country, and Juju's Map, I'm not going to make that backstretch move the only excuse for her. She really didn't show up here and was a big disappointment, just not taking any kind of step forward off her 3-year-old debut. And Gerrymander, I mean, Craig, the 114 TimeformUS speed figure that she got here, it's really not that far off what we've seen from some of the best 3-year-old fillies out there. I guess not really counting Nest's Belmont performance. That's a bit of an outlier. But Secret Oath, I think, just ran a couple points faster winning the Kentucky Oaks. So wouldn't be that surprising to see some other new faces win the Grade 1s over the summer, perhaps a horse like Gerrymander.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Secret Oath since the Oaks. As you said, who knows what Nest is going to do? Not sure what she's not going to get a chance to run a mile and a half. We know that. So yeah, I did like what I saw from Gerrymander and expect her to try the better fillies next time.
Yeah, probably shouldn't be a big surprise that she liked the added ground since she is the younger half sister to Lone Rock, who is a marathon specialist. I don't think she'll be running a mile and a half anytime soon like he does, but definitely stretching out, seem to agree with her in this race. The other stakes that they ran on Saturday at Belmont Park, unfortunately, also featured just a 4-horse field. 3 of them trained by Chad Brown, and it seemed that whatever plan Chad Brown hatched went perfectly here, as the lone non-Chad runner, Breeze Easy, got plenty of pressure from his Lakota Spirit in the early going, and that set it up for his 2 closers to get the job done, with Eminent Victor being the winner.
Yeah, it was definitely looked like some tag team tactics in here, and I mean that's what's going to happen when 3 of the 4 entrants are trained by one guy. And I can't blame Chad Brown. He's running his horses. It's a lot of people complain about it, but he's showing up and sending them to the gate, and you can't blame the guy for doing what's best to win the race. And he got the top 2 spots. Eminent Victor sat a nice trip in here, wound up with a 108 speed figure, which is a career best. She looked fastest coming in based on her 2-year-old form, and she ran well, just able to hold off Oakhurst, who also ran well in this spot. She was actually last. The pace, even though the top 2 kind of ran off, it wasn't like it was all that fast. We don't have any of them color coded, so I think the top 2 just were the 2 best horses.
Yeah, just to lend some insight into what happened in the early going, I don't think that it was the plan for Lakota Spirit to compromise Breeze Easy. I believe that she was probably pegged as the pace setter for Chad Brown, and when Chad has multiple horses in these races, he usually likes to tell one rider to act as the pace setter for the others, and I think that was supposed to be Lakota Spirit's role here, but you could see Manny Franco hustling her out of the gate, and she just wasn't fast enough to make the lead, and Breeze Easy, who was stretching out from a sprint race, it just seemed like she was a little bit aggressive under Joel Rosario, and Joel's not the kind of rider to take a big hold of a horse or fight it in the early going, so he just kind of dropped his hands and let her go on. And because Breeze Easy was so keen, she allowed Lakota Spirit to press her in the early going, and they went a little bit faster than Joel probably wanted to. I think Breeze Easy ran the best race. She probably doesn't quite want to go this far. A mile is probably her maximum distance. I think she's better going a little bit shorter, but I thought she battled on pretty gamely to only lose this race by 2 lengths, going so much faster in the early going than the top 2 finishers. But take nothing away from Eminent Victor. She's a horse that we really haven't seen on the track that much. This was just her 3rd career start, but she won this coming off a pretty long layoff, so she definitely has some upside for a trainer that knows what he's doing with a good turf mare.
Yeah, and I should mention Breeze Easy got the same speed figure as the winner, a 108, with her Oakhurst with a 107 in between. And I agree she ran well. I just think that ultimately she's going to be better off at shorter.
So look at another 1 mile race on the Widener Turf Course at Belmont Park, the same distance over which they ran the Wild Applause on Friday at Belmont. They just ran a maiden event for the 3-year-olds and up that was won by Fortticonderoga coming off a long layoff, and highlighting this race because kind of a similar race flow to the Wild Applause, where you had a horse kind of running off on the front end, going a little bit too fast. That was the money-burning Growth Capital, who lost again here at 3-5. I think he's been very short prices in all 3 of his starts. Finishing second in all of them. But Craig, I want to highlight the winner, Fortticonderoga, because I think this is a Shug McGahee runner, even though he was just breaking his maiden here, that might have stakes in his future.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I was watching the race on Friday. He ran a 110 speed figure, which is certainly solid for a maiden win, no doubt about that. And I just liked how he did it. It was his first time on turf. It was his first time stretching out from all the way from 6 furlongs to a mile. And he is just a 3-year-old. So, yeah, I did like what I saw from him. No argument for me that he's one with stakes in his future.
Yeah, this horse had debuted almost a year ago, back in July of his 2-year-old season, in an off-the-turf event that was won by Dr. Jeff, who looked very good at the time, and even though he has nothing but turf pedigree, Fortticonderoga actually ran pretty well to be second in that race, so looked like one that was meant to get on the turf. Obviously, being off for a year probably wasn't in the original plan, but seemed like he came back no worse for wear. Shug McGahee is a trainer that likes to give horses time when they need it, and this one seemed to benefit from the time off. off, just really ready to fire off the layoff. But Shug often gets these horses to continue improving, so I'll be interested to see where he goes from here. He is the younger half-brother to turf graded stakes winner Doswell, as well as a full brother to Secretary at War, who was also a stakes winner on the turf. So a lot of pedigree for this one to be good. And even though we got the right pace set up here, I think he's a horse that just has a lot of talent and is going to be able to move forward into some stakes in the future. Let's move on to a couple of other maiden races that were run last week at Belmont Park. Actually, two of them on Sunday, the same division of a maiden event. It was just split into two. Both of these 6.5 furlong maiden events for the 3-year-olds and up on the main track. The earlier one, the fourth race on Sunday, was won by St. Tappet, a horse that really couldn't sport a better pedigree, Craig, by Tappet out of the Horse of the Year, Havre de Grace. Sometimes these horses that are so impeccably bred don't show up as, with their bloodlines coming through on the racetrack, but this one certainly began his career the right way.
Yeah, he did. I loved what I saw from this one. He drew the rail, which is often not a great place to be if you're a first-time starter, but it didn't seem to phase him. He had decent tactical speed in here, and he ran a really nice speed figure. He wound up getting a 105 for the effort, and yeah, I just really liked what I saw from him, and he's one that I expect him to stretch out in distance going forward. I like that he was forwardly placed from that inside position, but I don't think we're going to see him sprinting very often. I would imagine he's going to move out in distance and has every reason to keep going.
Yeah, you know that I watch a lot of the workouts for morning line purposes and just out of interest that are posted on XBTV. And I remember watching over the winter at Palm Beach Downs this horse training in company with some good horses. I think he had a drill that was in company with Wit back in March and looked good in company with that graded stakes winner. I think more recently he had worked in company with Charge It. So Pletcher was pairing him with some horses in the morning that suggested that this first-time starter could really run. And he showed that he could on the racetrack. This was a nice performance. I agree, Craig. I liked what I saw from this horse. Breaking from the rail is not the easiest thing for a first-time starter, especially one that has intentions to show speed. And he didn't break that sharply. Had to rush up a little bit under Luis Saez. There was another horse that was a bit faster than him in the early going, so we had to briefly pause on the backstretch, come around that runner. But once he got into the two-path, he just looked like he was traveling as a winner the entire way. Drew off in the late stages. I agree with you, Craig. More distance is probably going to be better for this horse. There was a parade of first-time starters in behind him, but I think in particular this division of the maiden race, there might be a few horses in here that are worth following in the future. The second-place finisher, Golden Alchemist, I know a horse that Chad Brown liked coming into this race, a son of Nyquist, and Mount Craig in particular, who didn't take a lot of money on this occasion, but a Bill Mott, Juddmonte-owned first-time starter that's by Arrogate, one that's really bred to go a lot farther than this, especially on the dam side. So not going to be surprised if we see a few horses from this race make some noise at the upcoming Saratoga meet.
Yeah, I'm going to be a fan of Mount Craig. Don't get many of those. But and I should mention this race actually had a 109 final time figure. The pace was a bit slow. That flatters Mount Craig a little bit, who was much further back than the winner and even the second place horse. He was behind him early on. So yeah, good effort from all three of those. And the way St. Tappet finished just kind of lends credence that he's not going to have much trouble going further. He improved his figure from a 99 after a half mile all the way to that 109 at the wire.
The other division of that 6.5 furlong maiden event that went as the sixth race on Sunday was won by another well-backed first-time starter. This one, Accretive from the Chad Brown stable, going out for Klarvich stables. This one sired by Practical Joke, so more of a win-early sprinter pedigree for Accretive, but had to like what you saw from this one as well, Craig, because he won by nearly 6 lengths and just looked like he was traveling well the entire way.
Yeah, he did. His pace and speed figure line looks almost identical to the other horse we just talked about, except for he was able to make a bigger move between the quarter and the half. He actually was 5 lengths back early and just made this big move around the turn to get within a half length and then just drew off through the stretch. He's going to wind up with a 107 speed figure, so really nice effort from him as well.
Yeah, and a horse that took surprising early action in this race, the number three, Happy Bob, who was the runner-up in here, going out for Dominic Scatino, a barn that you don't really think as sending out live first-time starters in these open company races. He actually ran pretty well to be second, son of Run Happy, who had reportedly been working well into this race. But Accretive, obviously just much the best in this division. I'm not sure that there was the depth that we saw in the other division of the race, but the winner obviously has some talent, and we'll see what he does at the upcoming Saratoga meet, where they're likely to find an allowance race for him. Perhaps he'll match up against St. Tappet when they make their second starts. We'll see how all of that plays out. But Craig, let's move on to Churchill Downs, where they ran a graded stakes on Saturday that we talked about on the TimeformUS forecast last week. This one, the Grade 3 Chicago, that was won by Lady Rocket. Not a big surprise to us that Lady Rocket was able to get the job done here, as the TimeformUS Pace Projector had pointed out that she had a big tactical advantage in this race, and she was able to exploit it at a pretty generous 7-2.
Yeah, not just 7-2. I believe we got the full 980, so almost 4 to
Yeah.
1. And yeah, you just sometimes the betters fall asleep a little bit, I guess, because I think that's what happened here. I know we both liked what we saw from Penny Baker in her first start, but for her to go off at a shorter price at Lady Rocket was just nuts, if you ask me. I mean, she didn't have the speed figures that Lady Rocket did. She didn't have the tactical speed that Lady Rocket did. So just a really good effort from her. She ran a 116 speed figure for the effort and just showed she's always going to be dangerous when she's clear on the lead and able to have things her own way.
Yeah, and I think this race kind of exemplified the limitations of horses like Sconson and Bell's the One. When you have these sprinters that don't run the fastest speed figures and they're so dependent on pace, and they get into a race where there's just one load speed, it's really hard for them to achieve victories. And that was the case here. But Sconson, who I thought put in a valiant effort to be second, Bell's the One. We had talked a little bit about on the forecast how she's more of a 6 furlong specialist, doesn't really have that late punch in the final furlong, going the 7 furlongs to get the job done. And Bell's the One made a big middle move to get into the race, but she just kind of flattened out in that last furlong like she typically does, going the 7. So they ran fine to be second and third, but I think they're just not quite in the same league as a horse like Lady Rocket when she's able to get that pace advantage.
Yeah, they ran the same speed figures they kind of always do, right around the 110 mark. And unless they get the horses in front of them tiring, it's just not going to be good enough. And I like the point that you made about the 6 furlongs versus 7 for Bell's the One, and even Wisconsin too, to a certain point where they just aren't going to get the pace at 7 furlongs most of the time. That's probably why maybe 6 furlongs is better, and they just don't have that same finishing kick. So good effort from Lady Rocket. She's a good horse, and I kind of like seeing her get the win after having a couple of tough pace trips in the last two.
Yeah, and I had mentioned it on the Timeform US forecast last week. It's the fourth big performance that we've seen from the 6 runners that participated in that ruffian at Belmont Park back in May. Lady Rocket, I think, is now the third horse coming out of that race to achieve a career best Timeform US speed figure in her next start. Make Mischief and, of course, the winner search results have also come back with big efforts from that race. So pay attention to when runner-up Royal Flag comes back out of that race, because that ruffian seems like it's turning out to be a pretty live race.
Yeah, and also Bank Sting won Sunday. She also was coming out of
Yeah.
that race. She had a race in the interim where she ran a good second behind Make Mischief, I believe it was. But yeah, it is proven to be a really strong race.
The other noteworthy performance from Saturday at Churchill Downs was in the final race of the day, as Top of the Charts made it 2 for 2 in his career for trainer Brian Lynch. And Greg, this horse has been pretty impressive in both of the races that we've seen from him. He just is a really powerful finisher. I like the way that he just runs through the wire with so much vigor. I mean, he had dueled in the early stages with the other horse that took money, Favorite Outlaw, and just put that one away pretty easily.
Yeah, he looked really good doing so. My only concern with him is he hasn't run particularly fast yet. He got a 109 speed figure here, 110 on the final time, which was kind of similar to his first race where it got knocked way down for pace. It was 113 final time, 103 overall. But everything you see visually points to this horse is really good and is going to do well when he steps up into better competition. But I'm still going to hold my reservations about him because he's going to have to run faster at some point.
Yeah, I am encouraged with the way that he's finishing off his races, even though he's participating in races that I think both have had those blue color coded TimeformUS pace figures. That's always a little bit of a concern with a sprinter when they're getting perfect trips like he has. But I just like the visual of what I've seen from this horse, and it feels like he was beating a decent rival in Favorite Outlaw here. So the waters are going to get deeper. This is a 3-year-old, so there could be some stakes, graded stakes on the horizon pretty soon for him if they decide to try some tougher spots over the summer. But I'll be interested to see how he does in those races because just from a visual standpoint, I've liked what I've seen from him in both of these first 2 starts. Let's finish things up with a venue that we don't visit that often, Parks. We'll go back to the beginning of the week, very early actually, before we recorded last week's TimeformUS Pacecast, when on Monday, June 20th, they ran an allowance race that earned one of the better speed figures of this past week, Craig. I know you had highlighted this on Twitter earlier in the week. 2 Boss going out for trainer Todd Pletcher went to Parks, got a bit of class relief, and registered a pretty impressive 121 TimeformUS speed figure.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any fluke. I mean, he was running against some pretty decent horses in there. He wasn't even the favorite. I think he was like the third choice. He was facing horses like Bird King and You Must Chill, who have run some pretty quick races in the past. But he just blew this field away, and he did it by setting a quick pace. He was challenged by Irish Cork, who's another pretty decent horse early, and just shook him off and drew away. So 121, I don't remember if it was the fastest figure of the week, but if not, it's really close.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just that other horse at Finger Lakes that achieved, I believe, the same number. I think they both got 120 plus TimeformUS speed figures. The name is escaping me, Craig. You can probably say who it is, but that was just a 5 furlong race against some weaker competition. So not spending a lot of time on that one, but there was a very fast race at Finger Lakes this week. But yeah, I thought 2 Boss ran pretty well, and he was coming out of that really tough allowance race at Belmont Park, where Chad Brown's runner is highly motivated and Stage Raider are just kind of dominated. 2 Boss hadn't really shown up with a good effort in there, but getting it against some easier company at Parks definitely agreed with him here.
Yeah, that highly motivated race is coming back pretty strong. The horse you were talking about at Finger Lakes, Honor Among Men, I did want to give him an honorable mention. Don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but he won a 5 furlong sprint at Finger Lakes by almost 10 lengths, running a hole in the wind and got a similar 121 speed figure.
And then we'll finish things up with one more race from Parks from last Tuesday. This one not quite as fast as the number the 2 Boss got, but in a dirt sprint allowance race, we saw For the Love of Bourbon win by a neck, but just notable because he set a pretty fast pace in doing so and got a bit of a pace upgrade for this race to get a 118 TimeformUS speed figure. And I mean, a 118 is not going to be a grade 1 winner anytime soon, but I mean, given some of the races we were talking about from this past week, this is one of the faster sprints that took place anywhere in the country.
Yeah, he's a quick horse, no doubt about it. As you said, it was a bit of a pace upgrade, but he faced some pretty horses people have probably heard of. Yodel Who was in this race, ran second. He's a horse who's been pretty consistent and solid. And what's good for the Love of Bourbon, what's good for him is he's a Pennsylvania bred. He was coming out of winning a Pennsylvania bred stakes. He's won at this allowance race before, so he's obviously won with some talent, and he also has the ability to drop in and face state breds.
Yeah, for sure. And that runner-up Yodelie, who did get the right pace setup, he was trying to close in from last, just couldn't quite reel in For the Love of Bourbon, who survived a duel on the front end with Monday morning quarterback, who actually faded to last in this race. He's a horse that had some back class, as did a few runners in this race. Dreams Untold has been a stakes winner in the past. What Do You Think Now, who was the big favorite in this race, was coming off a couple of impressive victories in New York over the winter, but he just seemed to not be at his best for Rudy Rodriguez coming back off the layoff here. So yeah, For the Love of Bourbon going out for Michael Pino, definitely in form right now, winning his 3rd race in his last 4 starts. Well, Craig, that's all the racing to highlight from this past week. We do have some things to look forward to around the country coming up this week. It is that 4th of July weekend, so we're sure to have stakes racing on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We'll probably look at a sequence for Saturday. I know they're running the Stephen Foster Day card at Churchill Downs on July 2nd, that Saturday, and a lot of stakes are planned for that day. They'll probably have an all-stake sequence put together, so we'll take a look at that and see if it's worth discussing on the TimeformUS forecast.
Yeah, look forward to it. And I just want to give people a heads up if you get a chance. You mentioned the problems we're having filling graded stakes races in the short fields. I actually talked about that. I was a guest on the Going in Circles podcast with Chuck Simon and Barry Spears yesterday. So that's out there. You can find it under my Twitter. I if I haven't retweeted it yet, I will. And we kind of dive into that subject pretty deeply.
Yeah, Craig, we've talked about it a little bit. You know that's something that I've been harping on as well. Just too much racing, too many graded stakes. I know that it's an unpopular sentiment for owners and breeders to consider cutting down on the number of races and especially the number of graded stakes races, but something needs to be done because the product is just becoming very unfriendly to the bettors. So I'll have to go take a listen to that to see some of the points that you guys made. I know that's something that Chuck has been harping on for a while now. Well, everybody, thanks for listening this week. Remember, you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for listening this week, and make sure to catch when Craig and I come back for some handicapping on Friday for the TimeformUS forecast.